And for those of you that don't know, the fourth season of Community was without Dan Harmon. So, it was affectionately called the gas leak year.
Oh, there was that gas leak last year.
Oh, don't blame it all on a gas leak year.
Community is one of my favorite shows of all time. It had my number 3 slot in my top 10 shows of the 2010s and my number 5 spot in my top 10 of all time. It has a very diverse cast that allows for a lot of great combinations and personalities. Amazing chemistry was discovered while making the show. For fans of the show, it might surprise you to learn that Troy and Pierce were going to be the duo at first. You can even kind of see them setting it up in the early episodes. As they were filming the season, Troy and Abed seemed like they had the better chemistry and were the better duo, and they just decided to roll with it. They would make decisions while making the show that led to many outstanding moments. But sadly, the show suffered greatly after the third season when Dan Harmon was fired and several of the writers left the show and the new showrunners were less than qualified to take over the show. I'm sure they tried their best. Hell, season 4 feels like it was written by a fan. They understood the purpose of each character, they understood it had to be meta, and there should be movie parodies, but they weren't Dan Harmon, and Dan Harmon is crucial for the voice of the show. There are shows that can survive without their creator's voice, but for some shows like South Park or Yes, Community, the show is an extension of the person creating it. Season 4, in my opinion, kind of sucks, for Community standards at least. Everyone loves to preach that it's still better than most sitcoms, and yes, I agree with that, but most sitcoms kinda fucking suck, so that doesn't mean much to me. It seems like writers like Megan Gans and the fact that we still had a great cast is what really helped create highlights for the season that do definitely exist, but as a whole it just isn't the same, and it isn't the same in all of the worst ways. And if you think I'm just being Mr. Mean basement dwelling critic, the stars of season 4 feel the same way.
What did you think about the fourth season of Community?
Boy, it was my favorite season of Joni Loves Chachi. Look it up, kids. That's an old show.
So did you watch the whole?
I did not watch the whole series. You did.
You watched a lot of episodes.
I did. I skipped the gas leak year.
Okay.
And
I think it's safe to say, because I have friends who wrote on the fourth season, and some of them on the first 3 seasons, I think it's safe to say it wasn't the same show, and how could it be? 85-90% of the writers were new, so you're going to get a different show, a different type of feel.
Well, what if you could say anything to the executives who fired Dan Harmon and forced you out in solidarity? What would you say to them? What do you think the show could actually live on the way that it was before?
I think they should come out of the closet and admit that they don't have a creative bone in their body.
And that was you reaching out to me saying, hey, we got to get Dan back, and I will do everything in my power to get him back. Are you in? And without hesitating, I was like, yeah, please.
Now I hate when losers such as myself make YouTube videos attacking writers and people who worked on a show, people just doing their job. So let me just say I think writing a better season is something I can't do, and I'm sure everyone did their best. There are probably people aside from Jim Rash and Megan Gans who did a good job with this season, or did their best. But again, the voice was removed from the show, and I do think it's fair game to talk about. I mean, anything is fair game to talk about, but still, I do say this while acknowledging the people who wrote this season and directed this season may be very talented individuals. This show wasn't their voice. No one can do this show and make it the same way it was. Now I'm going to talk about every episode of this season, and my video will be significantly easier to make than the season. I'm going to assume that you watched it because A, I'm going to spoil it, and B, I don't want to do plot summaries for all of them. That would be boring, so let's begin. The history of ice cream storyline that is occasionally brought back up throughout the season was fucking stupid and probably would have done better for like a Nickelodeon sitcom. I do think Jeff and the Dean have a really funny dynamic in this episode though. In fact, the entire premise of Jeff just competing in all these things and the Dean treating like the Hunger Games was pretty funny. I also thought Abed's story was pretty good, pretty fit-in, though it quickly went downhill when they jumped to the Greendale baby scene. I don't like using this word too often, but I thought it was incredibly cringeworthy. Troy and Britta don't make a great couple. This episode reflects that pretty well. Annie and Shirley had a story, I guess. Pierce was trying to make a gay joke in the episode. Ah shit, I guess I did just do a plot summary. It's not that bad, honestly. I didn't notice anything was off when I watched this episode for the first time. The problems became more apparent as I continued watching. Although I do think it's weird that they did a satire of sitcoms when Community itself is already a satire of sitcoms in like every episode. It's a sitcom where one of the main characters is self-aware and calls out its own tropes, but in this episode it has a laugh track and a sitcom intro. A joke that stupid children put into their YouTube videos.
Oh, you guys never learn.
All in all, I give this episode a C+. Isn't that cute? Since it's the show about school, we're doing letter grades. Let's make DeviantArt report cards and act as if we deserve to ever be taken seriously again. I like the idea of this one. I feel like with the writing of the previous seasons, it honestly could have been something special. I like that we finally get to see where Pierce and Troy lived all those years. I like that it gives us a little bit more of Pierce's relationship with his half-brother. Troy and Shirley make me laugh in this episode. Jeff and Britta talking about Jeff's dad is an alright setup to a story that I actually kind of like. There's a lot that works in this one, but all the characters feel kind of off to me, and that's a problem throughout the whole season. C+. I feel like this guy belongs to a completely different show. Hell, almost every character introduced in the season felt incredibly out of place, with the exception of Brie Larson, who I actually really liked, but more on her later. Jeff and Annie's story was a little weird, but considering stuff that's happened in previous episodes, it's not really out of place. In fact, I liked it. I think that the story revolving Troy, Abed, and Britta was pretty good, but very anticlimactic.
Toby, have you ever been in a fight? Because I have.
Oh my god, he can make a fist. That would hurt harder than a slap. He's in that one!
I thought that was a really lazy and lame way to end that. Pierce and Shirley being part of the focus group to make an American remake of Professor Spacetime was pretty hilarious, actually. Getting to see how the show turned out thanks to Pierce, Abed's reaction, and Pierce wearing a Professor Spacetime USA shirt later in the show. All of that's pretty funny, actually. I think so, at least. I really did not like the antagonist in this episode at all. I think that there's a fine line between a character we are rooting against, but we still find funny, and a character that is genuinely unbearable. John Goodman in Season 3? Funny. The Screamin' Duh kids from Season 1 ruined the episode for me. Senior Chang, one of the best the show has to offer. Professor Cornwallis. They also try to throw in a heartwarming ending that doesn't really feel earned. Community is famous for creating some really wholesome endings to the episodes. But in this one, it's set up by Annie feeling like Jeff doesn't spend enough time with her, or doesn't want to be with her on a trip, even though that they're pretty much always together, this group, like, in every episode. And Annie and Jeff is a common pair-up. And that sets up an ending where everyone just happens to appear in the same location, and Jeff loves everyone. So C. We'll give this one a C. I think this one kind of sucks. The idea of the entire school being fed up with the Greendale 7 is a pretty solid idea, honestly. They've referenced the fact that the school is annoyed about how frequently everything going on revolves around them in previous episodes. So a conclusion where they decide that they want to give back to Greendale could be a fitting ending, or even just a second half to the episode, and that could have been really funny. All of that being said, a majority of this episode is just these really annoying and unlikable German characters who I do not feel bad for when they get forced out of the study room. I think the other students make a good point about the Greendale 7 being selfish characters, which I think we already know. They are lovable but incredibly flawed people, and that's why they're the most interesting characters in the school to focus on. So an episode about the school just being kind of pissed at them for hogging the study room and acting like the world revolves around them would have been a better approach in my opinion. I really hate these guys. Cornwallis is also introduced in this episode, and I hate him too. Oh yeah, and we're 4 episodes in and they're just now starting to attend classes. That's probably worth mentioning. The show seems to act like Professor Cornwallis was a bigger part of the show than he actually was. I swear they even reference him more than he actually appears on screen.
I let Cornwallis rub my feet to give me all the answers to a test.
No disrespect to the actor, he was in Clockwork Orange, amongst other things. He's great, I just hate this character. The jokes in this episode are also really bad in my opinion. Abed and the one German student having connections for a video game was really the only part that I liked. There's that stupid scene with them in a crappy study room and all the chairs break. Oh wow, isn't this so funny? It's in slow motion and they're playing dramatic music. It's so fucking funny! F for fuck you. That was clever. Keep it. That's a keeper. Okay, you see, I actually have to put this back in, but I gotta take the brownie out. And there we have some lovely meal. This isn't totally not a horrible thing for me to put into my body. We're gonna do a review of the brownie right now. I mean, I guess for a microwave brownie, Like, it's not the worst thing ever. It almost has, like, no flavor. But, you know, texture-wise, it's about what you'd want out of a brownie. It's nice and soft. It's not disgusting. That should leave me enough time to keep talking about the show. I like the Britta and Jeff storyline, and I hate the Shirley and everyone else storyline. Jeff finally meeting his father felt very genuine. Britta being a good friend to Jeff in this one did actually make me feel that warm, wholesome community feeling. Sometimes when they aren't making bad jokes and just let the characters be themselves, they get kind of a nice scene out of it. It's not desperately trying to be funny, it's just addressing something that's been built up over the show. I wish we could have seen Dan Harmon's version, you know, the guy who set it up for 3 seasons and now didn't get to do the payoff himself. But all things considered, this really isn't bad. The Shirley story revolves the rest of the study group doing Thanksgiving at her house, and they try to do a movie parody. It actually feels more like an Abed story with him doing the voiceover. To me, Abed is the most off out of anyone this season, and I think it's probably because he is the hardest character to write. On the outside, he may just seem like a character who does movie references and is socially awkward, but I always found the writing for Abed to be very genuine. Like most of the stuff he says about his worldview, thoughts on movies and pop culture, and his sense of fun all seems like it probably reflects the people who are writing his dialogue. I especially believe this when you learn that the actor for Abed couldn't be further from the character. He just does his research and does a great job performing the character, but he's not really like Abed at all. So his character really depends on the writing and the thought put into what he's saying, and as a result, I think we get a lot of really lame jokes. To me, it feels like they thought making movie references was enough. Abed spends a lot of time breaking the fourth wall and acknowledging that he likes to do movie and sitcom tropes rather than just doing them. Now, breaking the fourth wall and acknowledging tropes is something Abed has done since show 1, but to me, it
makes the group uncomfortable when you talk about us like we're characters in a show you're watching.
Well, that's sort of my gimmick. But we did lean on that pretty hard last week. I can lay low for an episode.
I see your value now.
Abed, why?
I see your value now. It's a callback to when we met first season, and me calling you your seasons is a callback to my first season dialogue. And me calling
Abed, I know what makes you off-putting, but why are you here?
Is much funnier than this.
I remember when the show was about a community college.
It's just a lot more forced now. Anyways, kind of a side tangent, but I wanted to address that. Abed is a very important character to the show, and the season gave him very little to work with. The Shawshank Redemption parody is lame in my opinion, but I do like the Jeff and Britta story, C-. Oh yeah, Chang is in the season too, and he lost his memory. He calls it Changnesia. I think that Changnesia is a funny word. But everything else about Chang is kind of lame in this season. I do appreciate, though, that they try to keep his story going. Season 5 basically says, fuck it, he's a teacher again. Season 6 kind of gives him an arc, but he's really just done growing after Season 4. And I really like that each season had a different thing going for him. Season 1, he's a Spanish teacher. Season 2, he's a student. Season 3, he's security, and then it escalates into him being a villain. And then by Season 4, he fakes losing his memory, which honestly isn't a terrible direction to take it in. I mean, if you want Chang to continue to be on the show and interact with the characters after the shit he just pulled in Season 3, this is probably the best way to do it. I just didn't really laugh at the lines they wrote for him. Ken Jeong is such a funny performer that his delivery alone works for some of his scenes, but there's also a lot of cringy moments of Chang. Again, hate to use that word, but that is the best word to describe some of these moments. There's nothing all that bad about this one, honestly. The characters still feel kind of off to me, and at this point I should just make it clear that I have a problem with this in all the episodes, with the exception of one that I will get to. I think Jeff's reaction to Chang being back is pretty true to his character. How far he takes things also feels true to the character, and the end of the episode is actually kind of decent. I'm going to give this one a generous B-. This one sucks. Again, just about every one-off character in Season 4 is shit. There are a ton of community characters from the show's history that are bad people but still funny. This is not one of them. This guy is irritating. The Jeff and Pierce story is almost alright, but I feel like they kind of fuck it up at the end. Pierce kind of went through a nice journey on the show in my opinion. In Season 1 you immediately learn about his flaws. In Season 2 they make him a lot worse and it builds into him basically being the antagonist of the second season. He kind of redeems himself in the finale, and that being paired with the fact that every member of the study group has done something fucked up at some point in the show made it so the group accepting him wasn't too outrageous of an idea. In Season 3 he's still not a great person, but he's no longer the villain. He does some genuinely nice thing and starts to become a more accepting person. Again, he is is still very, very flawed, but I can look at him and see him as someone who has grown a bit. And now in season 4, he's kind of nice through a lot of it. He doesn't do anything that awful, he wants to bond with Jeff rather than fight with Jeff. He helps Britta when no one else will, he disappears for half of the episodes. I would say his arc continued here. By season 5, he is written out, but not without an episode that shows an appreciation for him despite his flaws. He wasn't a great person, but he was good enough and grew enough to where 6 people were left heartbroken by his death. Some people don't seem to like that Pierce was killed off. Honestly, I think when you put his entire journey into perspective, it's not that bad of a conclusion for him. He was a pretty old person and he did a lot of bad things in his life, and as a result he doesn't get a super happy ending, but he does get an ending where he was loved by several people. You saw him do some pretty awful things, but you also saw him having a heart-to-heart with Jeff and helping out Annie. He was a complicated person. I think this episode handles Pierce very poorly, and it really comes down to a speech that Jeff gives, which I think is the worst Jeff speech in the entire series.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. Don't talk about Pierce like that. Look, maybe the only reason he can be so unpleasant is because we expect him to be. If we don't treat him like such a dick, well, he'll probably still be one 98% of the time, but the 2% he's tolerable, it might be worth it.
Oh yeah, let's tolerate someone who makes us miserable 98% of the time, even if we start acting more decent to him. Like, even if Pierce no longer has a reason to retaliate, if he still acts the same shitty way towards them, yeah, no, let's accept that, let's tolerate that, that's a great idea. Pierce deserves the backlash he gets. Each of these characters have incredibly low moments on the show, and I do mean incredibly low. Even lovable characters like Abed have scenes with him emotionally manipulating Annie for breakfast-related reasons, inserting chips into everyone so he can tell where they are at all times, and just frequently doing what he wants without actually caring the stress it puts on other people. Pierce has had the lowest moments of any of the characters, but the other characters know what it's like to be in his shoes, and they can see that sometimes he does do the right thing. Sometimes he is a very tolerable and maybe even enjoyable person to have a conversation with. They have considered removing him from the group, but ultimately he has proven himself enough to stay part of it. But that doesn't mean he isn't going to get called out for being an asshole. I mean, hell, all of the characters get called out for the shit they do. Pierce just does the most shit. Jeff saying that they should be nicer to Pierce, even if that doesn't change how he treats people at all, is not what they're going for, and this was an incredibly stupid thing to say. I like Pierce and Jeff bonding, but this is something that's been done better in previous episodes, like the double date one. I don't like the message that this episode spreads, and I fucking hated the main story of the episode, F-. This one is alright. I think Abed being like, oh, I want to grow as a character, so I shouldn't do tropes anymore, but wait a minute, I have a perfect opportunity to do this trope, now I'm going to talk to this girl about how I'm doing this trope. Now it turns out this is the trope I really was meant to do tonight, is a perfect example of how poorly Abed is written, but I do like his chemistry with Brie Larson, who is the one character introduced in Season 4 that I really like. So good that when the crew returned for Season 5, they actually brought her character back. The two have cute chemistry, and I buy the relationship. Britta and the Dean have a pretty good story in this one. I thought their story actually had some decent laughs, and the ending with Jeff and Britta was corny, but I did kind of find it touching at the same time. I don't know, maybe I'm a sucker for actually thinking this was kind of sweet, but yeah, I do. I think that Jeff and Britta actually have a couple of nice moments in Season 4. I'll give this one a C+. I'm really not putting too much thought into these scores, I'm just kind of listing them as I type this script. Some of them probably should have been rated lower, some of them maybe should be rated higher, I don't fucking know. This is the result of living your life in a way in which no one cares about you. I don't like going to restaurants alone. I can't cook. No one cooks for me. And this is just life. So we're going to be reviewing Hungry Man, Smoking Backyard Barbecue, pork patty, a chicken patty grilled. The brownie that we already reviewed, that gets 3 10s out of 10. And homemade mashed potato, home-style mashed potatoes, big difference. And sweet corn. There's an oven option, and we're doing the microwave version, so keep in mind this is the microwave version of this particular meal. Maybe the oven version's better. Start off with these potatoes. I didn't cool them off enough. They just taste like potatoes, it's fine. Moving over to the corn. Yeah. It's fine too. This isn't actually like that disgusting. I'm worried about the meat. I think this is the chicken. It smells fucking awful. This doesn't look like pork or chicken, but it has to be the pork, right? Better. But not amazing. A lot better. That was gross. That was actually fucking gross. I got some sauce on the plate. Was this important? So I'm gonna say overall, as Leonard would say, this is a buy. Hey, it's fucking Muppets now! It was becoming a tradition that they do an episode with an art style change. Season 2, stop motion. Season 3, video games. Season 4, puppets. Season 5, G.I. Joe for some reason. And Season 6, fuck it. I don't like this one at all. I was really high the first time I watched it, and I loved it. Then I watched it sober, and I think that the Hot Air Balloon song is really catchy, so I can give it that. I didn't find most of it funny. This is the part of the season where Chevy Chase made his exit, so they started to have to find reasons that he wasn't in the room. I think the ending with Shirley was kind of out of character. Like, I get it, it was supposed to be something really shocking and really heavy to give the scene a strong impact. But leaving her children behind at a store is too big of a mistake for Shirley to make, I think. She's definitely done some bad things on the show, like every character has, but she was never a bad mother. A lot of the stuff that she did that other people found bad and we, the audience, found bad is not necessarily something that she thinks she's in the wrong for. Like, she doesn't think she's in the wrong for thinking all of the other study group members are going to hell. But this just doesn't feel like her to me. Troy's was maybe a bit too much as well, but it's just played for laughs, so whatever. I don't like that they had Shirley do that. Hell, season 5 actually makes it worse. Shirley's husband leaves her again after this shit was thrown at us. What the hell? Why the hell did they give Shirley the middle finger like that? She doesn't even get a proper conclusion in the series like the other 6 characters did. She's just written out of season 6. I understand that there were like behind the scenes reasons for that, but my god, the movie needs to exist for Shirley more than anyone. I like the puppets they made for this episode, and I like that it had songs. Again, the first song is super catchy. Into the Woods is eh. And then the closing song is kind of touching, but again, I think that they go too far with Troy and Shirley. I really don't like the story, and I don't think the puppetry medium has as much purpose for the episode as the stop motion or pixel art did. To me, it just felt like, well, we already did these 2 things, let's do puppets now. But there's some behind the scenes footage of this one, and it does look like they put some real effort into it. My number 1 issue is I just don't like the writing. D+. This is my least favorite episode of the series. I also think it's worth mentioning that I think most of the second half of season 4 is much worse than the first half. Like, I wasn't being that negative at the beginning of this video. It was like 3 C's in a row, I think. You know, C is a decent episode. At this point, I think they're getting pretty bad. It's boring and kind of a weird episode story-wise. They are having Cornwallis over for Christmas because they want to get their grades to go up, and then he shows up, but he's acting like a real prick to everyone, which makes you question why he even bothered to show up. They also have a line explaining why Pierce isn't there, which is dumb. It would have been better to just not bring attention to it, and then they tie him up when he won't fix their grades. Abed keeps talking about how he wants to do a Die Hard parody this year because Abed just talks about wanting to do parodies now instead of just fucking doing them. Then Cornwallis is trying to get them to turn on each other, promising a good grade to whoever frees them, but then Jeff gives a speech that doesn't really make sense, and then it turns out Cornwallis could escape at any moment, but he didn't because he's lonely and actually wanted to be there. It's fucking bad. This is stupid, I'm sorry. There isn't a single funny moment in this episode. I think Professor Cornwallis is my least favorite character on the show. Okay, the Duck kids are. Those kids are much, much worse than Cornwallis. He adds nothing to it, though. He's a prick in the 2 episodes he's actually on screen in, and his motives are confusing. Abed is my favorite character on the show, just FYI, but he is annoying in this one. I don't even know what the point of this was. This was fucking stupid. F-, you're expelled. Get the fuck out of here. This one is actually just a good episode. Written by Jim Rash, the actor who plays the Dean, it focuses on the breakup of Troy and Britta, a relationship by this point of the season you may have forgotten was a thing. It does it in a really silly community way by having Abed and Troy reenact the movie Freaky Friday so Abed can break up with Britta for Troy. I think the comedy side and the dramatic side both work in this one pretty damn well. Jeff's annoyance of Troy and Abed feels very genuine to the show. Troy and Abed being dedicated to acting this out instead of just talking about how fun it would be to do a Freaky Friday parody feels very genuine to the show, and the more serious scene with Troy and Jeff having a heart-to-heart feels like a very genuine scene to the show. I think Donald and Danny do a great job acting like each other's characters. I think most of the jokes in this one are actually funny. The Dean pretending that he switched bodies with Jeff is also really funny. I think a little bit of that season 4 awkwardness is still here, but it really does feel closer to the previous season by a lot, and in a way I feel it justifies hooking Britta and Troy up. Most of the episodes don't focus on the relationship, and most of the episodes weren't that great anyways, so it's not like them being together really made it anything much worse, and if they didn't hook up, we couldn't have had this one pretty good episode of Season 4. I actually really like this one, and if I ever rewatch this show, I'm probably going to skip the gas leak year, but I won't skip this one. I'm giving this one a gold star sticker. It's actually yellow. I think it's an interesting idea that wasn't executed that well. There's a few okay moments, I guess, but I think the fact that they had to get Pierce a body double is the funniest part of this one.
It also was like, not the start, but sort of the start of the increasingly creative ways that we would disguise Chevy's body double.
Oh, yes.
So that he was never on set
There's
while
three
we were
different Chevys
shooting
for this
the
one, right?
episode.
I think this was 3 different Chevys.
I don't have a lot to say about it. D-.
Don't logic this one away from me. We finally figured out a way to make paintball cool again.
You did fucking not. This one's garbage. I'm sorry. Even when I was stoned off my ass, I hated this one, and I enjoyed the other ones when I was stoned off my ass. It wasn't until my rewatch of the show that I understood why people didn't like this season. This was a really lame way to bring back the paintball episodes. I think that the joke about Evil Pierce faking his death to teach everyone a lesson, but then forgot what he was trying to teach them was funny because that felt like something his character would actually do. But everything else about this one is just not great, in my opinion. It's also a shame that Jeff's graduation wasn't something that the actual writing team for Community got to work on. The Season 4 staff getting to write Jeff, me, and his dad, and Jeff's graduation just doesn't seem fair. F-. I promise I will never score anything like that again. I feel like a fucking loser, which I am. I sit in a torn up chair watching television shows all day. My life had so much promise at one point. I had ambitions and goals, you know? But how about I never got to do what I wanted? Do you know what I wanted to do? I didn't want to be the guy who makes YouTube videos talking about TV shows. No! I wanted to be the guy who made YouTube videos talking about movies. But my dreams were crushed, and I'll never be that guy. Because movies are kind of long, and I'm afraid I'll waste too much time watching one, but then I watched 20 episodes of South Park that I already saw before. But it's too late for me. It's too late for me. I've already wasted my life. I want to fucking die. After Season 4, we got a pretty decent Season 5. Sadly, Chevy Chase and Donald Glover departed from the show, but I do think both of them got proper send-offs. Troy by far got the best send-off, and I do hope we get a movie one day that explores what he's been up to since this episode. One can dream, right? Season 5 was really great for the most part, even after Troy left. I mean, it took a beating from Troy leaving, but I would say it's still pretty enjoyable. I just think it has a lame finale. They do a 2-parter, and it's so all over the place, and I feel like they didn't really have much of a plan for what they wanted to do with it. There were some funny moments, but I think it would have been better if they just did 2 standard episodes and then let Season 6 kind of serve as a part 2. Honestly, to me, Season 5 and 6 feel like the same season. They're both about the fall of the study group as old members leave, new members come in, and Jeff has to come to terms with growing old and being okay with moving forward. I think Season 6 is great. There's certainly some mediocre episodes in the final run, but Intro to Recycled Cinema is probably in my top 10 episodes of all time, and I do think all things considered, it has a great series finale. I would still love a movie that reunites the cast, but I feel like this was the right way to end the show. Season 6 feels like it's self-aware of its own downfall. It acknowledges Seasons 1 through 3 are the glory days, it acknowledges that the show wasn't the same when Donald Glover left, but it also acknowledges that it did its best to be something special and found a way to make the unfortunate events from behind the scenes play into the actual story, giving it a pretty fitting conclusion, even when considering the first 3 seasons. Jeff found something so meaningful and precious to him by doing something he desperately did not want to do and tried getting out of multiple times. Now he has grown and has to do it again, but this time he needs to go into it with a different attitude, and it seems like he will based off the finale. I feel like that intro song really becomes more relevant as you continue to watch the show. It's so perfect that you almost wonder if the show would have ended in a similar way even if Pierce, Shirley, and Troy never left. Them leaving during the final run did make the show less funny, but it helped the message behind the ending so much. I'm not saying that I wouldn't prefer the last 3 seasons to be just as good as the first 3, but I do find that interesting. The gas leak year is something that I believe deserves to be criticized, but I think there were a lot of people who tried their best, and I appreciate those who tried. As Ken Jeong explained in the clip I showed earlier, these were a bunch of writers coming onto a show that they never worked on before. It wasn't their voice. Of course, if 85 to 90% of the writers are different from what they were before, it's gonna be a different show. It would take an absolute madman to impersonate what the show was. So once again, even though some of the things I said in this video were harsh, no offense to anyone who wrote this season, I couldn't have done it better. If anyone really deserves to be criticized, it's the executives who made the dumbass decision to fire Dan Harmon, or possibly Dan Harmon, because, well, there's been some shit said about him. But that's another topic for another day. It seems like amends were made, so that's good. So with that all being said, Community is an outstanding show, Season 4 is noticeably less funny, Season 5 and 6 are different, but in my opinion good. If you haven't seen the show, I think Season 4 is worth watching at least one time, so you can see the few moments that are really good, and just form your own opinion. Some people like Season 4. Hell, just get really high first. You'll like it better. I'm not even watching a TV show right now, I'm just talking about one. I just turned my stove on by accident. I did. I'm gonna cause myself a gas leak here.